Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another enlightening episode of Al-Muminat Podcast. This is a space where we as believers come together to reflect on the wisdom of the Quran, share insights, and strengthen our connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whether you're joining us for the first time or are a regular listener, I pray that this session enriches your heart, mind, and soul. Today we will begin with Surat Al-Baqarah, Ayah 233, and our speaker for this session is Sister Amani. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us understanding and allow these reflections to guide us towards bettering ourselves and our communities. Let us start with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and delve into His words. Jazkallahkheir for joining us, and let's begin.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. I'm going to start, inshallah, with Ayah 233. Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والوالدات يرضعن أولادهن حولين كاملين لمن أراد أن يتم الرضاعة وعلى المولود له رزقهن وكسوتهن بالمعروف لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها لا تضار والدة بولدها ولا مولود له بولده وعلى الوارث مثل ذلك فإن أراد فصالا عن تراض منهما وتشاور فلا جناح عليهما وإن أردتم أن تسترضعوا أولادكم فلا جناح عليكم إذا سلمتم ما آتيتم بالمعروف واتقوا الله واعلموا أن الله بما تعملون بصير.
Divorced mothers will breastfeed their offspring for 2 whole years. For those who wish to complete the nursing of their child, the child's father will provide reasonable maintenance and clothing for the mothers during that period. No one will be charged with more than they can bear. No mother or father should be made to suffer for their child. The father's heirs are under the same obligation. But if both sides decide, after mutual consultation and consent, to wean a child, then there is no blame on them. If you decide to have your children nursed by a wet nurse, it is permissible as long as you pay fairly. Be mindful of God, and you know that God is all-seeing of what you do.
والذين يتوفون منكم ويذرون أزواجا يتربصن بأنفسهن أربعة أشهر وعشرا فإذا بلغن أجلهن فلا جناح عليكم فيما فعلن في أنفسهن بالمعروف والله بما تعملون خبير.
As for those who die and leave widows behind, let them observe a waiting period of 4 months and 10 days. When they have reached the end of this period, then you are not accountable for what they decide for themselves in a reasonable manner, and God is all aware of what you do.
ولا جناح عليكم فيما عرضتم به من خطبة النساء أو أكننتم في أنفسكم علم الله أنكم ستذكرونهن ولكن لا تواعدوهن سرا إلا أن تقولوا قولا معروفا ولا تعزموا عقدة النكاح حتى يبلغ الكتاب أجله واعلموا أن الله يعلم ما في أنفسكم فاحذروه واعلموا أن الله غفور حليم.
There is no blame on you for subtly showing interest in divorced or widowed women, or for hiding the intention in your hearts. God knows that you are considering them for marriage, but do not make a secret commitment with them. You can only show interest in them appropriately. Do not commit to the bond of marriage until the waiting period expires. Know that God is aware of what is in your heart, so be aware of Him and know that God is all forgiving, most forbearing.
I think we'll end there. I have a feeling we're not going to get past there. So inshallah, if we do, then we could just continue reading those ayat, inshallah. Jazkallahkheir. Thank you, Rawan. So these ayat are very heavy in rulings. And because I'm not a mufassir, I am actually going to approach these ayat from more of a reflection. And inshallah, you can all reflect with me. Um, and, I'd love to hear your thoughts, inshallah. So we're going to begin with the first part of the ayah. And I'm not necessarily going to keep going back to the ayah. Like, I'll talk about it a little bit and then sort of discuss concepts that we pull from the ayat in the way of reflection, inshallah. So the first thing in ayah 233, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes here that divorced mothers will breastfeed their offspring for 2 whole years. For those who wish to complete the nursing of their child, the child's father will provide reasonable maintenance and clothing for the mother during that period. No one will be charged with more than they can bear. No mother or father should be made to suffer for their child. So here it's interesting when you talk about, like, marriage already is such a complex thing where there's layers to marriage. There are things that make marriages flourish and do well. There are struggles within marriage, no matter how good or how healthy or unhealthy a marriage is. And then there are things that can lead to a lot of discord and or divorce. And subhanAllah, like, it feels like divorce is, being talked about for an extended period of time here in the Quran. And it's no surprise that it is, because how many families or how many stories have you heard, or someone you know, or maybe you yourself have gone through divorce or are experiencing it currently? Most divorce situations are not peaceful. Most of them are covered in difficulty and what we all call drama and all of these things. And there's a lot of unreason or people being unreasonable when it comes to divorce. There's a lot of emotions happening. There's there's children involved, there's property involved, there's different reasons that the divorce happened. Those are create a charge and an energy to the situation. And here's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala coaching us to show us that even in situations where we don't feel good, even in situations where people are hurt and emotions are super high, this is especially a time to turn to, what is pleasing to Allah, because it's harder to do in these situations. I remember there was a situation, this wasn't a divorce necessarily, but a family member of mine, her husband had passed away suddenly, and she was very young. She had a son who was like almost a year old. And my father and myself and my mom, we all went over there. She was in a different state. And I remember, like, as she's mourning this shock and this difficulty, and she doesn't even know what she's going to do next. The husband's, Allah yarhamu, his family started giving her a hard time over the very little money that would come out and that she would get for her and her son after her husband's death, like from the government. And I was shocked. Like, this is the first time I saw, like, firsthand people interfering in an unfair way, trying to, like, take away money from someone who needs it more than anyone right now. And it just was so strange. I was like, what's going on? And this is why we need divine intervention in these cases. Whether it's, someone became a widow or divorced, things get ugly very, very quickly. And they get ugly for a lot of different reasons. People don't trust people. People are like, oh, they're going to take advantage of this. And no, she just wants this. And no, she's crazy and he's crazy. And they just want this and they just want that. And, communication is a huge issue, right? Which, again, it's not surprising, because it may be one of the reasons that led people to divorce to begin with, that there was struggle with communication. So this concept of, we still do what's right to the best of our ability. And what's right is what is right to Allah, no matter how we're feeling. And I know that's easier said than done. That's why we surround ourselves with people who will help be the voice of reason in moments when we're having a hard time reasoning ourselves, right? So in this case, subhanAllah, when there's divorce and there's a child who's nursing, there's this beautiful, it's these ayat just spew gentleness in a very difficult situation, where here's a mother with her infant, or a child who's still nursing. And the goal here is, if you want, you can go for 2 years nursing. And if that happens, the father, who is either almost going to be the ex-husband or is now the ex-husband, or maybe is the ex-husband since she's divorced in this case, he has to spend on her. So if you think about this from, a contextual place, like what does that look like realistically? If she wants to nurse her son or daughter, and especially when there were no pumps, for like where mothers can pump at work and things like that, it literally meant she needed to be with the child in real time every few hours, right? And if they're younger, then even more consistently. So if that's happening, imagine what's practically happening as well. What's happening is now the mother is being told, don't worry about figuring out your financial situation right now. Just, you get to relax and just focus on feeding this child, right? And the ex-husband, who, probably does not like her much anymore and probably wants to separate and completely, just khalas, I'm done with this person. He is obligated now to cover her financially, and of course the child. So there's no questioning what happens at this point. This is how it has to happen. So everyone is in a good place, and everyone knows their role, and everyone knows what needs to happen. And the mother can comfortably just focus on this one thing in the way that she needs to. So again, this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rahmah coming in and guiding us when our feelings interfere with our sense of rahmah, right? And understandably, we get it. When people are hurt and things like that, this is the kind of stuff that we come up with. And that's why we need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's guidance. Now, the ayah continues, if both sides decide after mutual consultation and consent to wean a child, then there's no blame on them. So this idea, again, like you don't have to go for 2 years. You can wean them. It gives flexibility, right? There's sometimes things come up for the mom where she's not able to nurse for that long. Maybe she's been struggling with it the entire time. And now it's like, I can't go 2 years, they're eating solids after 1 year, khalas, like I don't have to continue. And it's not haram, it's fine. And I love here again, like you guys, this is not a cultural phenomenon. If both sides decide after mutual consultation and consent, these are two people who cannot stand each other, right? And maybe one of them can't stand the other and the other one's still attached, whatever. There's, millions of combinations in these situations. Very difficult, all of them, right? But there's communication that has to happen. Like imagine two people getting divorced who have a sense of like this consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they're reading these ayat and their emotions are high and they're like, I need to do right by this situation. I have to talk to her and I have to talk to him. We have to discuss this. And they're put in a position where they have to have these conversations and come to some agreement. This is almost like subhanAllah, these are good tools for a healthy marriage, right? Let alone a healthy divorce. And that is clearly the essence of an Islamic divorce. An Islamic divorce is supposed to happen bil ma'ruf, with goodness, right? That everyone is in a good place. People are being respected. Everyone is taken care of in the best, to the best of everyone's ability, right? Of course, again, like watch any movie, 99% of the divorces on the movies or in real life are not pretty. So Allah is, always here to save us from ourselves and our imperfections and our inabilities, subhanAllah. And the ayah here ends with, be mindful of Allah and know that Allah is all seeing of what you do, right? Be mindful of Allah with taqwallah. And taqwa has a lot of meanings. And I want to get into that a little bit. Why is it that when Allah is talking about something like this, very serious, this last part, I think to like most of us, immediately it sounds like a warning. And it is a warning, but it's also a recipe to help us. It's the fuel to help us react and interact in the situation as best as we can. It's the recipe for it, because the recipe for excellent character, may Allah give us all excellent character and good behavior, Ya Rab, is taqwa. Why? Because, and I know I said this before, we don't always feel like it. We don't always feel like getting up and doing the dishes. We don't always feel like cooking. Sometimes, stopping at Chick-fil-A sounds fantastic, or go to Pete's and eat from the buffet that's there. Not that I do that all the time. I'm not going to talk about myself right now, but sometimes I'm like, you guys want to eat at Pete's today? So, we don't always feel like, sometimes some people don't always feel like getting up and praying. Sometimes you're tired. Sometimes you're out in public and it's hard to pray in public, especially with the climate we're in. We're like, I'm afraid people will stare at me. I'm afraid someone might harm me. There's a million things. In Ramadan, do we all feel like I'm looking forward to fasting? No, we don't. But we do it anyway. Our taqwa gives us in our hearts, no, it's not even an option, right? And for some people, it's taqwa that really makes them and forces them, pushes them into that obedience. It's beautiful, right? So we don't always feel like being nice to our spouses, to our ex-spouses, to our children, to our family, to our parents. We don't. We get irritated. We're triggered by difficulties that we've experienced with them, also known as trauma, right? We have all the reasons to have feelings. Feelings are not bad. Feelings Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created for us to have and to experience. And He gave us this recipe to regulate our feelings. And more importantly, because sometimes we can't regulate the feelings, but we could regulate the actions that come out of the feelings. And the other thing that taqwa helps us do is it regulates how we perceive situations. How many times have we started to get angry with someone, or irritated about something, or like, you know what, I'm going to go tell them this, or I can't believe they did this to me. And then someone comes and says, reminds us of something, we're like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, prefers us to have mercy on people, that if we're good to others, or if we have taqwa, Allah will make a way for us, right? And sometimes those ayat help us to say, you know what, you're right. So because Allah will make a way for me, if I exhibit God consciousness, God fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's displeasure or punishment towards me, then this is going to help me adjust how I see this person that I'm really upset with. Now I'll see them as an opportunity. Now I'll see them as an opportunity for me to exercise mercy, caution, kindness, or just, even if it means I'm not going to say anything at all right now, because I know I can't say anything good at all, So these reminders help correct not only what we do, but before that, how we feel about a situation. That we can look at things and say, you know what, this is a test for me, and I am performing in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's going to see what I do with this. And of course, I can make mistakes and always, repent for those mistakes. We don't plan to make the mistakes, but we try our best. And subhanAllah, the next few ayat, a lot of them end with something along the lines of like, taqwa, remember Allah sees you, Allah is all forgiving, be aware what is in your hearts. Know Allah is aware of what is in your heart, so be aware of Him. It's a lot of being conscious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there. And that is the ultimate expression of iman, right? If I'm conscious that Allah is watching me, that is the embodiment of ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. That shows that, Ya Allah, I know you're there, because I'm conscious of you when I'm responding to this divorce situation. I'm conscious of you even though there's so much hurt and so much pain. I'm conscious of you even though I know I didn't wrong this person as much as they wronged me, right? A lot of situations, there's one person who may have wronged way more than the other person, right? We all wrong each other to some degree. And sometimes it's bigger, in some forms. So to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching me, this is where it helps me to produce the best behavior possible in the moment, right? Taqwa is, awareness that Allah sees me, and therefore it helps me in my decision making, right? Um, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in 235, which is coming up, the ayah that we read, and know that Allah knows what is within yourselves, so beware of Him, right? We can barely lie to ourselves. Sometimes we could kind of trick ourselves that, no, that's not what I meant, or no, this is not what I'm feeling, or no, whatever. And sometimes, honestly, we still don't know what we're feeling because of processing, and that's okay. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's in our hearts always. And so that should relieve us and also keep us on our toes to be honest with ourselves and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Taqwa is about ethical courage, right? Speaking truth, standing for justice, even if it's against yourself. And like we said earlier, doing what is right, even when it's uncomfortable. Holding back our tongue. Even divorce situations, especially, it becomes very easy to talk about everything in your marriage to a lot of different people. It's so important to minimize how much you are discussing, and especially with who. You want to pick someone who is trustworthy. You want to choose someone who is going to be honest with you and not just tell you what you want to hear. You want someone who's not just going to be like sitting there in a bashing session with you. You are going through a lot in this time, and you need the ability to talk to someone, right? So just, be mindful of, what do I need to say and what do I not need to say? Who do I need to say it to, and who needs absolutely not to know this? Especially people who will announce things and spread privacy about your marriage, because the marriage was a private thing and it will continue to be private. Unless, of course, there's some kind of abuse that's involved, in whatever needs to be said needs to be said. That's not a problem at all. But we can use our wisdom and tap into our taqwa to preserve whatever privacy needs to be private. Of course, in this case, resisting revenge and resisting, wanting to harm the other person, right? People do these things all the time. And look at these ayat by themselves. This is like the epitome of the opposite of that, where if there's breastfeeding, we're going to talk about it. Should we go for 2 years? Should we just go for a year and a half? You're good with this. You're not good with this. I got you covered. Don't worry. You don't have to worry about work. It's so much love and so much mercy and kindness, right? Even again, if it's not coming from a good place, it's just following the rules. The kindness is coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But to resist, taking full custody of children when either side knows that the other side is not harmful to the children. They were just not a good person for you to be with, for example. How many of you guys remember Mrs. Doubtfire, right? Like, such an amazing movie. And it's such a good example of, these are two good people that have grown apart. And, the wife, Miranda, I've watched it many thousand times. She wants a divorce now, right? And of course, what's his name? Robin Williams, a character doesn't. And he's obsessed with his children. He's a great father. He's just kind of goofy, right? And, maybe sometimes it's irresponsible, but he's not a harmful father. And while they were in court, like the first or second time, I can't remember, the second time, the judge, he said there's no more, he has no custody over the children. And the only visitation he gets is like once a week for 2 hours. And it's supervised. And he tells her in like a few scenes later, he tells her, like, you let that judge, pass this hukum, what's a hukum? Like a judgment. And you knew that I'm okay to be with the kids, and you stayed quiet, and he was so devastated by this. So subhanAllah, there's a lot of these difficult things that start popping up, like pulling away money and taking away like the house and all this stuff, when really it would make sense for the two people to come together and say what makes most sense for everyone as a whole, starting with the kids, of course, right? And again, easier said than done. Wallahi, I know 100%. And these things are so complex. And this is why we need the Quran. This is why both sides need the Quran. because it's also difficult when one side is aware of these things and the other side is like, I don't care, right? It's really
Mm.
hard. So we need both sides to be aware of these things. And by the way, these ayat are great for anyone to learn, not just even like teenagers, right? Even children, we could pull from these ayat. And it's good for teenagers to understand these things so that when they're adults, these things are already ingrained in them before these kinds of problems start happening, whether it's in their lives, la samahallah, God forbid, or in lives of people in their family, where now they could be the sounding board because there were seeds that were planted from a young age of these concepts that guide our thoughts and our actions and our feelings and our decisions. I can pause there, Edith, if there are any comments or questions.
No, the only thing I could comment would say also is because you had a good point about saying that this is good for teenagers and for other children because sometimes the parents they grow up with doing what they want and thinking how they should raise their kids. And when you said that this is good versus for them, you're right. If they were reading the Quran and listening to even the English part where Allah is telling you the rules and how to be mindful of Allah because at the end you're going to be judged on any decision that you make. So you need to have taqwa when you're dealing with these problems. Then maybe with the teenagers reading it for themselves, they might get out of that mindset of mom's right, dad's right to do whatever
Yeah.
they did. But then when they read these verses from the Quran, they can say, no, mom's not right, dad's not right. Allah is the one that chooses whether they like it or not. This is the way it should go. Not just
Yes.
because it benefits me and because, mother and fathers, they want to benefit their children and want to side with their children. But no, this would be for them to realize, no, I don't care. I know my mom loves me and my dad loves me and they want to benefit me. But it's really supposed to be about fearing Allah and what Allah says that needs to go that way, whether I like it or not. So that is a good point.
There's
Yeah.
like fairness to both sides. Both
Say that
parties,
again.
basically. I was saying, yeah, I mean, these ayahs also like show that there's like fairness to both parties. There's not one priority over the other. Yani, both have rights. It's a test for everybody, their intention, the mother's role, the father's role, yani, regardless of the situation that's happening.
And
Yes.
it's so hard to be like when you have children involved. That's the hard part because of course the husband's got feelings, the wife's got feelings, but if you fear Allah on the last day, then you need to put your feelings aside and go back to the Quran and listen to what Allah wants you to do. And that's the main thing. That's the hardest situation when it comes to these ayahs as far as like divorce, like you said. Sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's not. So you need to come together and have a mediator, maybe sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Mediators are like an appropriate mediator. Sometimes mediators make a bigger mess, but
True.
so you just need the right mediator. But definitely, that's like, and again, like you said, like they become the sounding board when the emotions are running high, and we need that, right? We need that in any times of difficulty, like when people, la samhallah, lose like someone to death, like that person is in a really difficult situation where they can't think clearly and having the support around us. So divorce a lot of times can do the same thing. It's very difficult and it can interfere with our clear thinking. And so going to the Quran and going to people who have some connection to the Quran and understanding of it to help us through those times, subhanallah. And I love what you guys mentioned about that the core of this is fairness and what's true and what's right, no matter where it's coming from, whether it's coming from mama or baba. They're both imperfect, so they can make mistakes too, and they can also be right. They could be right, they could be wrong, and at the end of the day, we're trying to just do what's best for everyone. And to add one more point to like if like a teen or someone younger is reading these things, and someone, even an adult who's not dealing with divorce, just these thoughts of these concepts of taqwa. This is universal for all of us, and it helps with any part of our lives, no matter what or when. You could be deciding what college to go to, or whether you want to marry someone or not, or if you're going to move to a different state, or if you're going to work to this in this place or with this corporation, or you have a difficult boss you're dealing with. How do you deal with a difficult boss? And there's so much about here, even that if you're dealing with someone and you're having a hard time, right, which is sort of like the overall concept, have taqwa, because it's easy, again, that you might feel like you work under your boss and they have this control and power, and so you may come at them as a victim, and you don't want to do that. You want to come at them as a team player with rahmah and with confidence that everyone here matters, no matter what your boss thinks, that I'm important, you're important, we're all important at the same time, and everyone's needs are to be met in a way that is fair. And subhanallah, even like there's a lot in these ayat where it says what is reasonable, like what works for you. For like the poor person, you give what's good for you, and for the rich person, you give, in terms of like supporting the wife, the ex-wife, and the children. So there is like this, what does that mean? That's left for interpretation. It's left for like the time. What does it mean for, what is a decent dowry right now? It's not necessarily like, $20. It's not going to be $20 because, you can buy a meal for $20 now, or 2 coffees from Al-Hamawi, not to hate. I love it. I'll pay all the money. But like, you can't do anything with that these days. So what is decent? Is it $100,000? Like, yeah, I don't think that's decent. I think that's too much. But, coming to a place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the space. He gives us these guidelines. And then it's beautiful because when he tells us, do what's reasonable, the confidence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has in us, that we are able beings to take taqwa, and get guidance from Allah, and cultivate taqwa and ask Allah for the taqwa, and then use that to become the best versions of ourselves. What is reasonable in our best version is more reasonable than what is reasonable to us in our less best version, right? So the better we get, and of course that's only Allah knows how better we are, but we keep trying, the better we are at making these decisions and coming up with reasonable conclusions for ourselves and for others. So I'll just touch on the next ayah a little bit, inshallah, and then we'll end with that. As for those of you who die and leave widows behind, let them observe a waiting period of 4 months and 10 days. When they have reached the end of this period, then you are not accountable for what they decide for themselves in a reasonable manner. Again, that reasonable manner pops up again. And Allah is all aware of what you do. وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. It's really beautiful because Allah says, and know that Allah is all aware of what you do. It's very powerful because like there's an emphasis there, like, listen, you need to know this, that Allah knows, he knows, he sees everything, he knows everything you do. And again, it's because here we're using our own reason within the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And one thing I'd like to highlight in this ayah is that for a widowed woman, she is able, after her 4 months and 10 days of waiting period, she is able to choose whether she wants to marry, whether, she's free to do that. No one can stop her. And it may sound like, well, why does that have to be said? And one of the reasons that I could think of in terms of culturally, and this is again a reflection, culturally there have been historically, and probably still till now, a cultural expectation that a woman should not remarry, that if she's actually loyal to her husband, her deceased husband, and to her husband's family, that she should not remarry. And I've heard this over and over in our community with the older generation, when the mother would lose her husband, or the wife would lose her husband, and she'd have 3 or 4 kids, or however many, or no kids. It would be like, mashallah anha, she stayed dedicated to her children. And it's unfortunate that that's as if like that's the only way to be dedicated to your children, right? There's nothing haram about remarrying. There's and it's very possible to remarry and have a stepfather to children who can love them and take care of them. And we see this very much so in the non-Muslim world that we live in. There's so many people who are married with and have brought other children from previous marriages, whether it was through, because they lost their spouse or they got divorced. And it's obviously some people have problems, but for the most part, culturally in the non-Muslim world and in America specifically, it's not a problem. It's just like, oh, okay, that's her package, right? And for us, perhaps that's something we have to work on a little bit more, is how do we make sure that, a divorced person doesn't have a label that means problem or used or not worthy, like someone who was never married before. And it's interesting because in the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making it clear to men that if you're interested in a woman during that period, right, when she's still not allowed to remarry, you are allowed to show interest, but it has to be in an appropriate manner and it can't be in secret. Like, imagine, you guys, that at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, people were already ready to marry someone. Like, it wasn't an issue, subhanAllah, right? And so this is something we have to, reignite in our community, this idea that divorced or widowed men or women are not, a'udhu billah, like they're not damaged goods. They're not someone who's like second in line. If I'm really desperate, then maybe if I reach a certain age, then I'll start considering. Here's what I would say. Consider people as individuals, because it may be that someone who was married and divorced has a lot of trauma, and they haven't been able to move forward from that marriage, but you won't know until you give them a chance. And it may be the opposite as well. It may be that this person married, divorced, or became widowed, and they actually learned a lot from that experience, and it made them ready for a better and healthier marriage, So it's important to be open. And I always say, be open to consider a lot of different types of people that you think you weren't, of course, anything that's halal. And then if you just can't do it, once you've tried, then say no. It is okay, right? And I know that may sound like maybe like that's being a jerk, but you're really not. Because if you're trying to push yourself to become comfortable with something that's halal, that's outside of your comfort zone, and you tried the first time and it just like, oh, I just can't. Like, maybe you just can't, you're not ready to take on someone and their children, but you wanted to try. And not try like get married and then get divorced fully, but meaning like consider it, talk about it, talk to the person, maybe even meet the children if that makes sense. I don't know. Like that's very personal, What I'm saying is give these things a chance, not only because you want to give those people a chance. You yourself may be missing out on someone who's perfect for you, and a situation and a condition that is so beautiful for your own growth and your own well-being and your happiness. Right? So that's something to keep in mind, subhanAllah. I think we can end with that if you want to jump in, Edith or Rawan.
Yeah, I think that's a good a place. We stopped at 2:40.
I technically stopped at 2:34, and I kind of talked about 2:35 basically.
Okay.
So
So
yeah.
2:34. Okay. All right. With that, I think we could end there, and then we'll move on next week, inshallah. Rowan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, alhamdulillah, I also, another reflection was that, like Sister Amani said, يعني, with taqwa, you have, and your pure intentions, it leads to better decisions, again, for both parties, or everyone involved, I should say.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we definitely
Alhamdulillah.
should reach out to like our imams or our sheikhs for
Yeah,
further
definitely.
discussion on these subjects, because for like every situation is different, like Amani
Yeah,
said, not
yeah,
all of them are the same, so every situation is different. So go to your imam of the masjid of your community or a sheikh in your community, so that this way you could get proper and correct feedback.
Yes.
inshallah.
And I would
So
add to that, maybe if some couples are willing, even in the process of divorce, to reach out to a therapist to help them with the process of divorce. And I know we usually think therapy is for like keeping a marriage together, but it can also be helpful to help separate in a peaceful way.
I think most important too, Muslim therapists.
Absolutely, absolutely. But honestly, sometimes even there are plenty of non-Muslim therapists who can work
Different
well with
perspectives.
Muslims and respect the boundaries. But yeah, absolutely. I think it's easier to start definitely with a Muslim
Yeah, only
therapist.
reason why I said that is because sometimes they don't know like our ruling, as far as when
Right.
where you can step over or you can't step over, and they don't know boundaries. And so that American, they don't know the boundaries and the ayats of Allah, and the sheikhs and therapists that are Muslimin, they know that if they don't know something, they have to go back and talk to the imams or the sheikhs
Yes.
to make sure that they don't cross the boundaries or tell them something that will make them go out of like the boundaries of Allah or the commands of Allah. That's all I'm saying.
Yes.
That's why.
Yes. Absolutely.
But I think we could wrap it up, Rowan. What do you think?
Yeah, that wraps up today's episode. We hope you found it beneficial and enjoyed tuning in. Your feedback is always welcome, whether you have questions, comments, or suggestions. Feel free to share live or email us anytime at almu'minatpodcast@gmail.com. And don't forget to continue sharing our podcast with others. Our aim is to guide and enlighten our ummah. A special thanks to Sister Amani for hosting today. May Allah reward you. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to having you with us in our next episode. Until then, take care and stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you. Jazakallah khair, ya Amani and Rowan.
Jazakumullah khairan.
Ma assalam.
Wa iyyakum. Thank you guys so much.